I think you should look at in absolute numbers in terms of what they're making, and they are going to get a big increase in this cycle of collective bargaining, and they deserve it.
Chicago Sky guard DiJonai Carrington was ejected and charged with a flagrant-two foul because of this block against Indiana Fever player Sophie Cunningham.
He is easily the most powerful figure in all of basketball, and right now his complete silence speaks louder than any statement he could possibly put out. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver sits directly above the entire WNBA, above Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, and above every single coach and player currently caught up in this massive mess. On August 8th, DiJonai Carrington was ejected for a flagrant-two foul on Sophie Cunningham, then went on social media to post about white privilege while tagging the Fever.
DiJonai Carrington has responded publicly for the first time since flagrantly fouling Sophie Cunningham and then posting white privilege on Threads while tagging the Indiana Fever.
Foul away from an automatic suspension, and the fans absolutely exploded over it. Analysts even called for the league to be completely shut down. And Silver, who has commented on everything from Engelbert's job security to player pay, has not said a single word. So let's break down exactly what happened. This is the foul that started this entire controversy. It all started the way so many of these high-stakes games do, on a fast break. Sophie Cunningham was running out ahead of the pack, ball in hand, with absolutely nothing but open floor between her and the rim. Right behind her, Chicago Sky guard DiJonai Carrington was closing that gap at a lightning-fast pace. The play that happened next took less than 2 seconds to unfold, but it is the exact reason we are all still talking about this a whole week later. Carrington quickly caught up to Cunningham in midair and forcefully struck her across the head and neck area. The physical impact was heavy enough to completely knock Cunningham off balance, sending her crashing hard onto the polished wood floor, even though her contested layup still managed to drop right through the net. The officiating crew initially called a flagrant one, but then they headed over to the replay monitor. After a careful review, the call was upgraded to a flagrant-two. That is a flagrant-two, which means automatic ejection. The defensive foul committed by Diarika Hamby has officially been upgraded to a flagrant foul, penalty 2. The crew of referees cited 3 very specific elements in their decision: the windup, the impact, and the follow-through. That is official league shorthand for a dangerous play with clear intent behind it and a very real risk of injury. Carrington was immediately ejected on the spot. Cunningham certainly did not stay down on the floor. She popped right back up almost immediately, looking visibly furious, and went straight after Carrington. She got so close that teammates and game officials had to step in and physically separate the two players before things escalated any further. When the media caught up with Cunningham in the post-game press conference, she absolutely did not hold back her thoughts. She openly labeled the foul completely unnecessary, stating that she believed it was entirely intentional, not just a normal basketball play gone wrong, but a deliberate hit. She was completely honest about the fact that she did not have any personal history with Carrington before that moment, but she suggested the Sky Guard might have been carrying some built-up frustration into the game. And when reporters asked her directly whether she thought the heavy contact was just accidental, her final answer left absolutely no room for interpretation. She called the act intentional, plain and simple. On the other side of things, Carrington herself did not stay silent on the big question of her intent either. While speaking to reporters after the game, she described the physical contact as an honest mistake, stating flatly that she did not do it on purpose. She noted that she never said it was specifically about the foul or the Fever. Except that is not true. You literally did tag the Fever directly in your social media comment. That is something worth sitting with and thinking about for a moment, because it means the two high-profile players at the very center of this dramatic moment gave the basketball public two completely contradictory accounts of the exact same 2 seconds on the court. Cunningham insists it was intentional. Carrington maintains it was just a mistake. Neither of them has budged an inch since. So what did their head coaches think of it? Chicago Sky head coach Tyler Marsh ended up giving a noticeably cautious and measured answer to the media. He admitted to reporters that he had not actually gone back to look at the replay yet, but in that live moment on the court, he thought that she made an honest play on the ball, adding that he did not think it warranted a flagrant-two ejection. He reiterated that he did not see the instant replay right when the event happened on the floor, so from his perspective on the sideline, it simply looked like Carrington was making a genuine defensive play on the ball. He stopped short of defending the flagrant-two ejection call outright. explaining only that he was not entirely sure in real time whether the contact warranted that severe level of penalty. Then we had Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White, and her post-game response is where this entire story takes its very first major turn, and it is also where a crucial piece of background context actually matters a whole lot. Here is something a ton of fans completely forgot in the heat of the moment. Stephanie White used to coach DiJonai Carrington directly back when White was leading the Connecticut Sun franchise, and that shared history shaped exactly what she said next. Coach White did not immediately rush to fully back her own player's version of what went down. She labeled it a hard foul, which nobody really disputed. Yeah, I mean, look, it was definitely a hard foul. As she explained post-game, I don't think that DiJonai intentionally came out to get her across the neck like she did, but it did happen, and I thought it was the right call. She made it clear she didn't believe Carrington intentionally targeted Cunningham's neck specifically, even while fully agreeing that the officials made the right call by ejecting her. And then she went quite a bit further, adding that from her own personal experience coaching Carrington, she knows the guard plays with absolutely everything she has in her and competes hard on every single possession. That absolutely nobody in this league is walking into an easy, uncontested layup against her. It was a measured, almost diplomatic response, the kind that satisfies absolutely no one completely, especially not the fans who wanted their head coach to come out swinging in defense of her own injured player. And certainly not anyone looking for an obvious villain to point at. Just a coach trying to describe what she actually saw and who she actually knows without inflating or downplaying it. Was that the right call from Coach Steph White? Fans are still heavily arguing about it. Some people read her comments as loyalty to a former player getting in the way of standing up fully for her own locker room, while others saw it as exactly the kind of mature nuance this sport needs more of. A coach who can call a foul dangerous, that was Steph White, and what she said post-game about DiJonai. What she said was it was a flagrant-two foul, but she simply did not think DiJonai was purposely going for her neck, and she still refused to assume the worst about the player who threw it. Either way, let's be clear, absolutely nobody, not Cunningham, not White, and not even Marsh, ever disputed that this was a hard physical foul that could have seriously hurt someone out there. The big disagreement was never about whether it was dangerous, it was always about intent. And intent is exactly where this story was about to get a whole lot more complicated. The social media post that changed everything. Just minutes after her ejection, while the game was still actively being played without her, DiJonai Carrington posted two highly controversial words to social media that completely changed the entire conversation. White privilege, tagged directly at the Indiana Fever. She goes on to social media, where Carrington says white privilege. Critics say she is playing the victim card. Is there something deeper at play here? There was absolutely no real elaboration in that first post. No real explanation of what specifically she meant by it, no context, and no follow-up thread. Just the phrase itself, sent out into the world minutes after a flagrant-two ejection. It was aimed squarely at the team of the players she had just fouled. We need to slow down right here, because this is the exact part of the story where a lot of channels start picking sides. We are not going to do that. Let's look at what actually happened from both people involved in their own words. When Cunningham was asked directly about the social media post, she flatly rejected any suggestion that race played a role in the officiating decision. She pointed out that she had been ejected for a similar hard foul herself during the previous year, and that she truly believed the league's overall disciplinary process was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, regardless of who was involved. In her view, the ejection was entirely about the play itself, not about who threw the punch or who received it. Carrington, for her part, did not immediately clarify what she meant. It was not until 2 days later, on August 10th, that she finally posted again. She later went back onto social media and basically argued that absolutely everyone who connected her actual game ejection to that white privilege post, which had also tagged the Indiana Fever, was making a huge mistake. This time, she pushed back hard on the idea that her original post was specifically about the foul or the ejection call at all. She described herself as someone with a real academic background on the subject, noting she was an early graduate of Stanford University with a focus in African and African American studies, and she said she was not speaking from ignorance when she used the term. But that follow-up didn't exactly calm things down. If anything, it raised a lot more questions than it actually answered. If the post was not about the ejection, what was it about? And why did it land just minutes after the call, tagged directly at the team on the other end of that hard foul? Carrington never fully spelled that out, and as of this video, she still has not. The sports media reaction split almost immediately and very predictably along familiar lines. Some sports commentators, including ESPN analyst Jameel Hill, pushed back on what they saw as a major rush to pile on Carrington without engaging with the broader point she might have been raising about how women's sports media covers black athletes versus white athletes. They argued that DiJonai Carrington has made that exact play many times on many different players, both black and white, and it just so happened that Cunningham made a great play, so she got fouled as opposed to getting blocked. According to Sophie Cunningham, race was not involved. Other media outlets took a far more critical approach, accusing DiJonai Carrington of throwing out a heavy accusation without offering any real explanation or context. We are not here to tell you who is right. This is indeed a genuinely disputed moment, and both Sophie Cunningham rejecting the racial framing of the play and DiJonai Carrington insisting that she was not speaking carelessly represent genuine positions held on the record by real people in their own exact words. What we can certainly tell you is exactly what happened and when it happened, and who exactly said what, letting you sit with the facts the way they deserve. We should also point out this was not just some fringe debate happening in random online comment sections. This became a mainstream sports media story within just hours, with major news outlets on both sides of the political spectrum running completely opposite headlines about those exact same two words. That alone tells you quite a lot about where the WNBA sits right now. This is a league popular enough and scrutinized enough that one single social media post from just one player can easily dominate national sports coverage for almost an entire week. Just a few years ago, having this level of attention on one post-game moment would have been completely unthinkable for this league. Today, it is simply Tuesday. What we can also share with you is that this was not even the only massive crisis brewing inside the United Center that night. One night, two separate crises. While the Carrington ejection was still the main headline dominating the first half, an entirely separate storm was quietly building up for the Indiana Fever's own franchise player. During the third quarter of action, Caitlin Clark drove hard past Chicago's Natasha Cloud. She got pushed hard out of bounds in the process, making accidental contact with an official who was standing near the sideline. The whistle blew almost instantly. Technical foul assessed to Caitlin Clark. It turned out that the Fever were told this technical was because Clark ran right into the official. On its own, a simple technical foul barely even registers as real news in a league this physical. But this was not just any ordinary technical. It was Clark's 8th of the season. According to official WNBA rules, accumulating 8 technical fouls in a single season triggers an automatic one-game suspension. Caitlin Clark was not just getting some simple warning or a fine. She was, at that exact moment, looking at missing the Fever's very next game against the New York Liberty. A real and immediate consequence, not some hypothetical one. Caitlin Clark's own reaction afterward was calm, but you could still hear the frustration underneath it. She explained that the referee told her she had run into her and that she had already gone back and watched the game tape herself before speaking to any reporters. She stated quite plainly that she did not believe there was anything intentional about the physical contact and that she was hopeful the league would review it and ultimately rescind the call. Here is where the Fever organization moved fast. According to detailed reporting from The Athletic, the team filed an official appeal on Clark's behalf almost immediately after the final buzzer sounded. They were not waiting around to see what would happen. Every single hour that technical stood was an hour closer to Clark missing a game the Fever desperately needed her for. And then, later that afternoon, the WNBA made its final decision. The technical foul was officially rescinded. Caitlin Clark's suspension threat disappeared just as quickly as it had originally arrived, and she was cleared to play against New York without missing a single beat. It is worth stopping to consider just how much was riding on that single call. 8 technical fouls is not a small number to rack up over a single season, and every single one of Clark's games gets replayed, clipped, and dissected by a massive national audience in a way most WNBA games simply are not. A phantom whistle that might draw a simple shrug in a much quieter matchup becomes a major headline the very moment it involves the league's most watched player. That is not a complaint about fairness one way or the other. She is the best playmaker. Why is that? Because I have always said this, Caitlin Clark creates the space and she can make the pass. It is just the reality of covering Caitlin Clark in 2026. Every single foul, every technical, and every review carries massive stakes that follow her from city to city. And that Liberty game was not some throwaway matchup either. New York has been one of the absolute toughest outs in the league all season. And losing Caitlin Clark for even one game against a tough team of that high caliber could have shifted the Fever's entire playoff positioning. That is exactly why the front office moved so fast. They wasted no time on that appeal. This was not just about protecting a star player's pride. It was entirely about protecting a deep playoff run. So, by the time August 8th was finally over, the Indiana Fever had lived through two entirely separate crises, all in a single game. One of their key players had been on the receiving end of a violent, ejection-worthy foul that quickly spiraled into a national conversation about race. Their ultimate franchise cornerstone spent an entire afternoon completely unsure if she would be allowed to suit up for her next critical game. And somehow, through all of that chaos, the team still walked away with a massive victory. It is exactly the kind of wild night that forces you to ask just how much utter chaos a single franchise can absorb in one evening before someone above the team level finally has to step in and handle it. That question did not stay rhetorical for long, exposing the WNBA's bigger problem. By the time the sun came up the very next morning, social media had already turned August 8th into a full-blown referendum on the entire league. And the outrage did not stop with just this one foul. Within hours, a completely different old video started recirculating that had absolutely nothing to do with Cunningham at all. Barstool founder Dave Portnoy, a well-known supporter of Clark, dug up footage from the 2024 WNBA playoffs, back when Carrington was still playing for the Connecticut Sunday. During that series, Carrington had caught Clark directly in the eye on a defensive play, leaving her with a highly visible black eye. Harassed relentlessly by Carrington, she somehow finds Boston. Clark gets hit directly in the face by Carrington and is down. Caitlin Clark is down. Absolutely no foul was called back then. Portnoy resurfaced the controversial clip, labeled Carrington the dirtiest player in the league, and the post exploded past 1 million views within a single day. But remember, fairness cuts both ways here. Clark herself, back in 2024, publicly said she did not believe the eye poke was intentional. She just laughed it off and quickly moved on. Carrington said the exact same thing at the time, insisting she was not the type of player who would target someone's eyes on purpose. 2 years later, yes, 2 years later, with a brand new controversy on her hands, that old clip came roaring right back anyway and became an unavoidable part of the conversation whether she wanted it to or not. There was a prominent moment that made its rounds all over social media when Caitlin Clark got poked in the eye by DiJonai Carrington during that first quarter of Game 1. Not every single reaction fell along predictable lines. Former WNBA player Stacey Dales and prominent commentator Skip Bayless, two people who almost never agree on anything, both publicly backed the official's decision to eject Carrington. Indeed, it did not take the refs too long to eject DiJonai Carrington. Separating that official judgment entirely from the heated debate over her post afterward, this complex story was never as simple as two sides just yelling past each other. Plenty of observers found room to argue that the ejection was correct, the post was highly confusing, and the massive pile-on afterward went way too far, all at once. College basketball analyst Aaron Torres did not hold back. He said it was time for NBA Commissioner Adam Silver to seriously consider shutting the entire WNBA down altogether, arguing a league with decades of financial losses simply could not afford another national embarrassment. Plenty of passionate fans pushed back just as hard as Torres pushed it out. But the mere fact that a mainstream analyst floated shutting the entire league down, even just as a provocation, shows how far this story had traveled beyond one single flagrant foul. Fans flooded timelines with their own strong takes. Some accused the league office of a recurring pattern, letting incidents fester for days without a real statement from the top. Others focused directly on the officiating, questioning how a technical serious enough to trigger a suspension could be reversed in just hours, while a flagrant-2 ejection stood with absolutely no further discipline. Underneath it all sat a deep frustration predating this specific game by a very long shot. This was not the first time in 2025 and 2026 that players had publicly called out league leadership. And Cunningham herself had been outspoken before about wanting real accountability from the very top. There is so much outside distraction, but the actual matchup between Miles and Kelsey was absolutely phenomenal. Against that intense backdrop, incidents like this do not land as isolated events. Instead, they land as one more data point in an ongoing argument about whether the people running this league can actually handle its massive growing pains. That is exactly why so many fans, in the days following August 8th, started asking about one man specifically. Not Cathy Engelbert, the WNBA's own commissioner, who fans have already spent several months actively debating. This time around, the calls were aimed much higher at the person who technically sits above her, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Because here is the thing. Joining us now to talk about that and much more is NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Commissioner, it is so great to have you. Silver is not just the head of a separate league watching from a safe distance. He actually has real structural authority over how the WNBA operates, which raises a very obvious question. If fans and analysts are being this loud and Silver has this much actual power, why has he not said a single word? Where is Adam Silver? Let us be completely clear about one important thing before we go any further. Adam Silver has not made any public statement specifically addressing the Carrington-Cunningham incident, that controversial white privilege post, or Caitlin Clark's recent technical foul situation. At least, not as of this video. If that changes, we will bring you his actual words immediately. But right now, on this specific story, his silence is real, and it is completely total. That silence matters a lot more than it might for some far-off executive, because Silver is not distant from the WNBA. Structurally speaking, he is Cathy Engelbert's direct boss. The WNBA operates directly under the NBA's umbrella, and Silver holds real authority over the direction of the league Engelbert runs day to day. And this is not a man who has historically been shy about weighing in on WNBA matters. Just a few months before this incident, at the NBA Summer League, Silver was asked directly about Engelbert's future with the league, and he did not completely dodge the question. He said he was quite pleased with what he called tremendous progress under her leadership, but when pressed on whether she would remain in her role beyond this current season, he stayed quite noticeably non-committal, saying only that those formal conversations had not actually happened yet with the WNBA's board. If you go back further, Silver has been even more direct. In the fall of 2025, in the middle of a massive wave of player criticism aimed directly at Engelbert's leadership, Silver publicly acknowledged that the league was indeed dealing with what he called relationship issues between the front office and its players. Not just economic disagreements over the collective bargaining agreement, but very real trust problems that desperately needed to be addressed. He did not shy away from admitting that the league was going through what he called growing pains. And when he was asked point blank on national television whether WNBA players deserved a much bigger share of the league's revenue, Silver did not hedge at all. His answer was a simple and direct yes. That was the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, who appeared on the Today Show in New York earlier this week, speaking out. Yes, I think the share isn't the right way to look at it because there's so much more revenue in the NBA. I think you should look at it in absolute numbers in terms of what they're making. Earlier this year, once the brand new collective bargaining agreement was finally ratified, Silver showed up publicly once again to celebrate it, calling the final outcome fair for both sides, and praising the deal's new salary structure, which is tied directly to league revenue growth. He even talked about having personally spoken with the players himself about carefully reading through the reports coming straight out of those bargaining sessions, and about feeling genuinely pleased with exactly where things landed. That is simply not the profile of a commissioner who prefers to stay behind the scenes. That is a man who consistently shows up on camera whenever he has something to say about this league. So, this is certainly not a man who avoids the spotlight when it comes to the WNBA's problems. He has weighed in on the commissioner's job security. He has weighed in on player relationships. He has weighed in on revenue sharing right there on camera, and done so without flinching, which makes his complete silence on a flagrant-2 ejection and a white privilege post that made national headlines. That hard foul quickly became something much bigger when DiJonai Carrington went straight to social media and openly accused the league of white privilege, suggesting that it played a major role in her ejection, and a sudden suspension scare involving the league's biggest star, all the more noticeable to everyone. Maybe Silver's just waiting for the dust to settle before he says anything publicly. Maybe he considers this squarely Cathy Engelbert's territory to handle and not his. Perhaps there is an official statement coming that simply has not landed yet. We genuinely do not know, and we are not going to pretend we do. But there is also a version of this where staying quiet is actually the smart move. Commissioners across almost every major sport tend to let disciplinary matters play out through official league channels before weighing in personally. And jumping directly into a live, unresolved dispute about race can easily make things worse instead of better if handled clumsily. So silence is not automatically the wrong call here. But silence is also never neutral. It sends its own message, whether Silver actually intends it to or not. And right now, that message is landing as pure indifference to a lot of the fans who've been asking about it for days. But here is what we do know for sure. A man who has been totally willing to talk about the WNBA's commissioner, its finances, and its relationship with its own players has so far said absolutely nothing about the biggest controversy that the league has faced in weeks. And until that changes, fans are going to keep asking the exact same question they have been asking since August 8th. If Adam Silver really has an opinion on what happened in Chicago, when is he finally going to share it? So that is where this stands. A flagrant-2 that left Sophie Cunningham flat on the hardwood. Just two simple words that somehow sparked a massive national conversation about race. One star player ended up just a single technical foul away from a suspension she never expected. Yet through it all, the absolute most powerful man in basketball has not said a word. Commissioner Adam Silver has commented publicly on Engelbert's job and on player pay. On pretty much everything else, but not this. Not yet. If that changes, we will bring you his exact words. If this breakdown helped you make sense of a chaotic week, hit like, subscribe for more, and tell us should Silver have spoken up by now.